Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Weekly Word Podcast. It is episode 9 in the meantime, and I apologize for not having a podcast up on Friday. It was a busy week, lots of racing, lots of race reports to go through, a variety of other strategy planning sessions with athletes. And in general, I just didn't get to it. It was quite a stormy, rainy week here in Northern California, and with kids and dogs and activities, I just didn't find the time to sit down and really work through a thoughtful and an informative podcast. So it is now into the new week, and hopefully I'll get up 2 this week so that we can keep with the format of 1 per week and just usually sending these into the website and up by Friday afternoon or Saturday morning. Another thing you guys might have noticed is that it is now up on iTunes. So you have the ability to subscribe and listen and see if there's a new episode based off of your subscription of podcasts on iTunes, and also therefore take it with you wherever you like to listen. Again, I want to remind everybody listening to this podcast that this is not intended to be some big audience type of podcast. It is designed to answer questions, go over some topics and insights for the athletes that I coach. Some of the athletes I might not coach, but they're friends, or I have coached them in the past. They might be athletes that are friends with some of the athletes I coach, just in general in this community. Now, I realize some of this is going beyond the community, and that is fine. But again, I'm not trying to spread any type of gospel here. A lot of this is my opinions and my thoughts, and hopefully, that's that theme word again, hopefully you all, whether listening weekly or just occasionally, get some sort of value out of it. A tidbit here, a nugget there, where you're just interested, you think about it the next time you train, and you find it informative. So that's sort of the intro for this week. I'm going to do this podcast differently than before because I have a variety of questions and emails that I received. And I think with 9 or almost 10 podcasts in, and the short Kona blasts as well, I've got a pretty good episode here on just answering some of the key questions that I've received. And hopefully they're informative to everybody, not just to the people who sent me the questions. So I have about 8 questions I'm going to go through, and part of that I often ramble off on a side topic. So let's get started then. So the first question I received is asking why training on feel is so important. I've also received a variety of feedback regarding what others perceive and feel might not be what I'm looking for or how I'm describing it. Or many of you might not have the ability or learned yet how to train on feel, what to look for and what that means. So I wanted to talk a little bit about training on feel. Some of you have seen in the workouts that I write fast on feel, FOF. So feel training is very important just because when things go wrong, whether it's our Garmin not working on the bike, whether it's our Garmin not working on the run, or whether things are just not there for us on race day, as well as many training days, being able to pull back into your body and just listen to your body and allow yourself to be connected with your body well enough that you know what pace, what effort, what speed, what wattage you're doing. So in the form of swimming, that you have a good feel for what hundreds pace you are holding. And that doesn't mean at every 100 you hit your Garmin watch or you look at the clock on what pace you're holding, but that you practice in the pool or even open water, which is better, the ability to just swim on feel and know at this effort, at this turnover, at this feeling of the water, of how I'm grabbing the water, how I'm moving through the water, it is familiar to be, let's say, a pace of 123 per 100 or 143 per 100. The number here isn't important. But we want to be able to click into a pace that we know we can hold, that we know we can identify as sort of a base pace. And from that, we know we can go faster from it, stronger, harder. We also know that we can slow down from it. And having that knowledge, especially in the swim where we don't have a watch, where we don't have a pace clock as we're swimming in open water, it is important to know what our pace is, what our feel is of that pace, especially early on in the race. So often we start a race, whether it's a 2.4 mile swim or a longer swim, and in the races sometimes they're loops, and people normally positive split the loops, which is fine, but they positive split them by too much. And as you have all heard, or maybe have said before, it felt really easy and I thought I was in control. That sentence, that commentary would not come up if you had a good sense of feel for the pacing of your swim. Early in a swim when you're fresh and not yet fatigued. Late in a swim when you're fatigued and you feel that your arms are not as strong or your stroke is not as effective. Both those can be plenty often simulated in swim training. So feel in swimming is very important. Feel on the bike, similarly. There's days, I had an athlete just this last weekend in Cabo who said his Garmin wasn't working and he thought he was going easy enough. Well, there's a variety of inputs. There's a lot happening on a race, in a race, and it's extremely hard to remain on perceived exertion on a 112-mile bike, especially as competitors are moving by you, especially as you are feeling more fatigued. You're trying to drink and eat. There's a lot of input. So usually it's quite nice to have something that keeps you under control, whether that's heart rate or pace. But when that turns off, when that's not working, when circumstances don't allow that, we have to feel comfortable and familiar, non-panicked, I would say, of knowing we can do this on feel alone. And we've done it enough in training so that we have the ability to recognize how we're moving along on the bike on a feel sensation. So we all have been there before where we know, well, this feels about like 180 watts. This feels about like 22 miles an hour. We have the ability and we have the capability. So it's just something that we need to train more. And that's why I feel it's important to do on the bike and the run and the swim. I'm not going to go into a run detail because, again, the concept remains the same. So training on feel is quite important. Another reason why training on feel is very beneficial, because when we're training on feel, we're not staring at that number. We're not being dictated by a pace, a wattage, a heart rate, and we can focus more inwards. We can focus on our form and technique. We can focus on our mind, on our posture, on our shoulders, on our foot placement. We can focus on our technique swimming, our reach, our balance in the water, and so on. Again, swimming is always a little bit easier because you do have that time in between clock checks. But when I'm talking about feel, this is more for running and biking. So again, the feel aspect is something not to be overlooked. And the last thing to be said about feel is it allows us to often go at the proper pace based off the fatigue that we are currently feeling. So if we're pretty worked and we're pretty tired from the training, if we allow ourselves to go on feel, listening to our body, it often finds a pace, a rhythm, an effort level, a sensation that whereby it is healthy and it is moving effectively for training, but it also knows not to overdo it and create more damage. Again, listening to your body, knowing today this is what my body's giving me, this is what my body's telling me, and I am not going to push through that. Of course, there are training days and effort days where we need to push beyond that, but when I put in feel for a workout, or there's times when we just train aerobically, or we want to just go out and do the exercise and focus inwards, it is a great time to listen to the body, focus on the body, and see what it is telling us and giving us from a workout perspective and intensity perspective. So the next question I got was why at this time of year we spend the majority, if not all of our time in the small ring on the bike. Many of you that have been with me for a year or two or many years are familiar that I, in the preseason at this time of year, like to have everybody riding, as well as myself, in the small chain ring. So much so that if you run your finger along the big ring, it should be perfectly clean, showing that no grease is on there from the chain having ever moved into the big ring setting. So why do we ride in the small chain ring? Well, there's a variety of reasons. Many of you know that I'm a Cadence believer. I believe in a higher cadence than many triathletes ride, and just because it's a muscular question. So at higher cadences, we recruit more of our cardiovascular engine, heart rate. And at lower cadences, we push a bigger gear, which means we're recruiting more muscular power. And it's a different type of fatigue. But as you all know, for an Ironman triathlon or even a half Ironman triathlon, that muscular fatigue carries into the run. And over 112 miles, especially on a longer day like that, being able to run off the bike after being muscularly fatigued from pushing 65 to 75 cadence or even just under 80 for 5, 6, 7 hours makes running very hard. Whereas at a higher cadence, the heart can handle way more of a load, way longer of a load while pushing or turning over the gears. Of course, there's a few other aspects of the big ring versus small ring, high cadence versus low cadence. Riding at a low cycling cadence in a relatively big, hard gear requires greater force on the pedals. And that increased recruitment of fast twitch muscle fibers, which burn through glycogen and fatigue quickly. And they cause increased muscular fatigue, like I say, extra strain on the knees as well. So as I just said, not only are we muscularly more fatigued for the run, but glycogen stores are also emptier. We burn through them quicker. So from two aspects alone there, we are creating more fatigue as we get to the run. And so by the time you get to the run, your legs are spent. And using the smaller gears at a higher cadence spares your legs for the run later in the day. It's really that simple. It's mechanically that simple, and it's physically that simple. And for most triathletes, as well as most roadies, are best served if they keep their cadence in the high 80s to low 90s throughout most of the ride. Now, some of you have longer legs, some of you have shorter legs. There I have some different theories, approaches. I believe that the lever ability of longer legs requires a little bit lower cadence, mid 80s, low 80s. I believe that those of you with shorter legs would want to hold a higher cadence because the lever effect is not as great. But I mean, those are details that we don't need to focus on. So at this time of year, back to why we do it in the preseason, it keeps you in an easier gear, easier effort. So small ring, people want to shift to a harder gear to get a stronger workout. not needed at this time of year. It's a great time to work on our aerobic capacity. Aerobic capacity being our ability to uptake oxygen to the working muscles. And that only increases, that only gets better if our intensity level, if our effort level on the bike is lower. And also, higher cadence at this time of year is a great time to start working on gradually creeping that up from a 100-mile ride averaging 78 to hopefully a 100-mile ride averaging 82 or 85 or 86 come the spring. It is an incredible energy savings, and for those of you that have not experienced it, it's hard to imagine how much energy savings it is. But also, having worked with a variety of pro cyclists, not pro cyclists, with a bunch of pro triathletes, there were always a few pros in the field years ago, and there currently still are, that can push an amazing bike leg. And they're pushing a low gear at a low cadence with big watts. And they get off the bike, and usually either they're in first, second, or third. They're way up there, but they don't have much of a run. Muscularly, they're shot. So our focus in the small chain ring has a fitness component, has a mechanical component, and has a feel component in that it keeps us going easier and more aerobic in the preseason. I hope that answers that part. I think it probably does. The next question I got was, what do you mean by connected versus fit? In a lot of my emails and my writing, as well as my commentary in the training logs, whether workout log or training peaks to you, I talk a lot about staying connected. And it means something different than being fit. So the question there is, what is the difference? What am I meaning by that? Connected means we are connected to the activities we're doing. We're repeating the motions in swimming, cycling, and running. That doesn't mean we're at our fittest. That doesn't even mean we're fit. But our efficiency of movement, our ability to recognize and feel comfortable in that movement, and our muscular structure and ligaments and joints and cartilage in that movement are all still connected. So not only is there the neuroscience aspect of firing the muscles and that memory gain of efficiency and how it feels and hitting that sweet spot and knowing how that cycling cadence and that cycling pedal stroke, how that freestyle arm swing and pull through, how that running stride feels, and we want to keep that firing. There's also the muscular aspect that we want to keep that going with regards to how it fires, that we're not sore from doing it the next day, that we can quickly settle into a rhythm of running or cycling or swimming. Now that rhythm doesn't mean it's as fast as during the season. It doesn't mean that it's what you would define as fit, but that there is a rhythm. We all know what it's like to feel out of shape, where we feel the rhythm or sense the flow of running, cycling, or swimming for a few strokes, and then it quickly deteriorates and it goes away. That's not being connected. Connected is that we can maintain form, technique, the movement efficiently, and while it may be a lot slower, it is still maintainable for a good amount of time, whether that's cycling 2, 3, 4 hours. And of course, we get fatigued, but we can shift to an easier gear and still maintain form and technique. Whether that's running 90 minutes to 2 hours if need be. Sure, again, we have to slow down, but we're able to maintain form without falling apart and sort of running half sideways down the sidewalk. And swimming, very similarly, that we're able to swim 3,000-4,000 yards. Sure, the times are slower and our oxygen depth is bothering us, but we're able to go through the motions and do it successfully without flailing away. And as we maintain that connection to our fitness, I often write that we're only about 3 to 4 weeks away from being somewhat in shape again, and I would say 8 to 10 weeks away from being fit again. Now, fit, as we've talked about, does not necessarily mean that we are ready to take on an event, but fit means that we are now at a place where the training is progressing us forward. The training is at a level that what we're doing from that phase forward is a benefit, is a gain in fitness, is a gain in performance, is a gain in speed, power, watts, pace, etc. From where we were before, hopefully. Now, it's oftentimes hard to get to that same point from earlier in the season, which means earlier this last season, where we were at our fittest. But we also want to get to a point in 8 to 10 weeks if we're connected to getting back to what I call fitness. Because at that point, we're truly back engaged in the process of progression. Progression, like I mentioned, does not always have to be in the form of fitness gains, but also in that we're better prepared for the workouts, that we're recovering quickly, and being better tomorrow than today, and so on. So that's what I mean by connected versus fit. Being fit is a totally different discussion and definition than being connected. Connected is usually about 40% to 50% of our max training load. So if you're training 22 to 24 hours a week or 18 hours a week, well, connected is around 9 to 10 hours a week. Again, that's max training load that we're taking 50% of. That 22 to 24 hour person, yeah, it's 11 to 12 to 13 hours, right around there. Not as taxing in time demands, but again, connected. I hope that answers that question. So another question I've received is, could I give an example of what I mean by the bookends of racing, especially in Ironman triathlon racing? That works well also in half Ironman racing. This is obviously not a strategy in the ultra running world, so bear with me as I work through this and describe this. And I actually used or wanted to use a different example of what the bookends mean that came up about 2 weeks ago at the Ironman in North Carolina. So in this example, the bike was shortened to a half Ironman due to the hurricane effects in North Carolina to the roads. So at first it was about 50-mile bike, then it turned into they found a few extra miles to make it a true 56-mile bike. So what it ended up being is a 2.4-mile swim, a 56-mile bike, and a marathon of a run. And while that is an extreme example because you have a shorter bike ride in order to highlight your fitness and your ability and your less fatigue going into the run, it was still a good exercise for the athletes doing it to really have a rare opportunity to apply the bookend strategy that I want so many of my age group athletes and basically all of my pros to apply. So what is the bookend strategy? The bookend strategy is that you have a strong swim, that you remain controlled, almost going a bit too easy on the bike in order to have your best possible run. In order to run a marathon, because I'm going to use the Ironman example here, in order to run a marathon that you know based off of your training numbers, based off of maybe a standalone marathon, what you are capable to run. So that might be an unknown number for many because A, they've never tried it, they've never run a standalone marathon. But I firmly believe that if you pace your day right, if you fuel right and hydrate right, and you stick to your strategy, that you are capable of running quite close to a standalone marathon time, as well as seeing the times that you consistently run off the bike or on long runs in training. So, for example, you should be able to run a 3:30 marathon in an Ironman if you consistently see 7:30 to 8-minute mile pace in your training runs. If you do speed and half Ironman efforts or tempo efforts and they're lower sevens, that still is a perfect translation to a sub, 8-minute mile marathon in an Ironman. That you can start in the 7:30s and slow due to fatigue down to the 7:40s, 7:50s, and end up running just around 3:30. It takes a lot to apply this strategy. It takes a ton of patience, and it takes a ton of, in many cases, experience, because you have to really know your own nutrition, your own hydration, and exactly what it should feel like that you're not fatiguing yourself for the run. The bookend strategy is also pretty challenging mentally, because besides that you feel like you're going too easy on the day, the race, your intentions of your desired outcome of the race are slipping away from you on such a long portion of the day, 5-6 hours of it. It also requires that you have a sense of what is too hard and what is not too hard. And I know that sounds ridiculous on how I just said that, but what I mean by that is 112 miles is tiring even if you ride it super easy. I challenge any one of you to go out and ride 112 miles at your easiest wattage, just basically turning over the pedals. It's tiring. It fatigues you. Even if you are well hydrated and fueled, it's 112 miles of turning the legs over. So if we feel that fatigue, we often think, well, I am too tired, therefore to run my best marathon. If we feel that fatigue, we think we might be going too hard, although we're going perfectly easy and allowing the day to set up for a strong run. So in this case, the marathon example at North Carolina was a good one, because most saw that race as an opportunity to bike harder. I only have half the bike ride. I'm going to raise my wattage. I'm going to push harder, and then, still have the opportunity to run the marathon. I'm going to be less fatigued because it's only half the time on the bike. Well, in this case, I told my athletes to do exactly the opposite. Stick to their Ironman wattage, maybe go a few watts higher, but nothing significant, nothing close to half Ironman watts. And instead use this as a rare opportunity to have your best possible run ever. You're going to be 2.5 hours to 3 hours into the fueling process and hydrating process and fatigue process going into a marathon, versus 5 to 6 hours. So instead, let's find out what you're capable of on the run, and then we have a number, and then we can see how 56 miles will translate to 112 miles and the effect onto the run. So a great example of bookends, this athlete then went on to have his best swim ever. He worked pretty hard, and it was a strong effort, and we don't know if there was current or any type of aided effort, but he was way up there in the swim, so relatively and percentage-wise in the age group, he improved. And then he rode a strong bike, stayed fueled, had to be very patient. There were plenty of people passing him on the bike. He is capable of a lot harder and faster and stronger push on the bike. And he had quickly moved himself from probably being top 2 or 3 on the swim to moving further back in the age group on the bike. Actually, I stand corrected, because he was top 10 after the swim. He rode a super steady bike with just the right wattages and fueling and hydration that we wanted on that bike. and got in off the bike in 8th. But he actually flatted once and also had a second flat and rode that dead wheel back in. So what probably could have been a 5 to 10 minute faster bike turned out to be just right, to show even more how much patience and how easy one can go and still have their day. And then he proceeded to run not only his best run or best marathon run in an Ironman distance, but he also ran his fastest standalone marathon. And yes, again, the example is extreme, and he ran himself into second place and got his Kona slot. But the highlight here is to show how we now have bookends. We have a top 10 swim and what that means. We have an example of how patient and how chill and how mentally resilient we need to be on the bike, despite the age group moving past us and others wanting to race harder and a flat and so on and mechanical issues, and yet still getting off the bike, sticking to the plan and running your best marathon ever. And so back to the original point, what do I mean by bookends? Many of you have heard me say it before, but if you can swim fast, relatively, and if you can run fast, relatively, we can always improve the bike. But your ability to run well off the bike, as I spoke about with the Kona lessons and my observations from Kona, this sport, the Ironman Triathlon, is all about your ability to run. And in order to run well, you need to find out what you're capable of, what you can run, so that then we can work backwards into seeing, now that I know how fast I can swim and how fast I can run, now let's gradually find out how fast I can bike without compromising that run that I'm capable of. So in his case, he ran a 3:15 marathon. And so now, the next time when we bike, we're going to do that same wattage, that same effort, that same approach, and see how badly it compromises that 3:15 marathon. Now, the big disclaimer here is, of course, you add another 2-3 hours of fatigue further into your day, stomach issues, all kinds of things can come up in these next 3 hours, those extra 3 hours in the bike, so that you're later in the day on the run when things can go wrong. Yes, there's a very higher likelihood of the GI issues, of the fatigue issues, of the heat issues. All that does come up in a longer race, but at least we know what we're working with now. We know what engine he has. We know how to work with that now. And next season, we will address each one of these aspects in order to ensure he not only has a good Kona, but also that he gains confidence in always being able to run that well off the bike. Having that joker, having that wild card in your back pocket for Ironman and half Ironman races going forward is an invaluable tool, because you know you don't need to panic on the bike. I can run them down. And just like we talked about in my article on the website with the lessons from Kona, Patrick Lang running himself all the way to the front of the World Championships, that knowledge, that confidence, that just pure ability to just grind your way to the front of a stacked field will help him in every Ironman he ever does again, because he doesn't have to worry. He knows what he has done before, and he knows he can do it. So, enough on that topic. I hope that answers that question. With that said, too, congrats. We have one in so far for Kona 2017, and we had another one qualify this last weekend in Cabo. So now we're 2 in. I think we're looking at probably a good 8 to 10 this coming year, so hopefully we can keep the list of AIMPers going to Kona growing, because it's going to be a busy year over there. We have a few athletes that will qualify. I'm not really too concerned about that. And then we have a larger team that also has a variety of athletes that will qualify. So, and that I'm working with and coaching. So it will be a busy October next year on the Big Island. Next question, Chris. Why are you so opposed to drafting on the swim? Well, this is a good question. I'm just of the opinion that drafting on the swim puts us in a position early on in our day of relying on somebody else, on taking factors out of our own, or matters out of our own hands, giving up the control of our day, and relying on somebody else's feet, sighting, pacing, fitness to set up the first leg of our swim. And I feel it just sets the tone for the day. We've trained so hard for a year. We've made a lot of sacrifices. We've done a lot of work to get to this point, to control the things we can't control, to not get worked up about the things we don't control, to roll with it, to be patient, to have a strategy, to stick to our plan for the day, execute the plan. So many things went into finally being here on this Ironman day, on this long day. And the athlete wants to find feet as part of their race strategy. I don't like that. It's already sending the tone that that I will find feet that are fast enough to pull me without having to do a lot of work to a good swim. And so much more goes into a good swim than somebody's feet. I've swam and led many of races where I've been swimming very crooked and a very bad line and pulled 20, 30 swimmers with me. I've been on feet in races where somebody swam a bad line and pulled me in the wrong direction, and I'm constantly course correcting and just out of my rhythm and wasting energy on course correcting and on speed changes, because all of a sudden I don't have feet because I am course correcting. It also, we don't know that person's fitness. So maybe they took it out pretty strong on the first loop, but they'll go backwards on the second loop. Now you have to spend your energy again on finding another set of feet. Or if you think you went a little harder on the first loop, you stick with that person, and now you actually are going too slow and you're equally fatigued, but you're not going faster, and your time shows no result, or actually could be a little bit slower based off of finding the wrong feet. And then, the ability to feel the pace and the effort level and the energy used while being on somebody's feet is very hard, because you're so focused on keeping up with their speed. You don't know if you're swimming too hard. You don't know if you're swimming too easy. You don't know how your stroke is holding up and all the adjustments and wasted energy when you think, why is that person accelerating now? Oh, they're actually not, but you're just constantly subjected to their pace, their speed, their kick, their direction. And I just would not want to do that. I would not want to start my day being already controlled or a victim to somebody else's race. That's just why I don't like drafting. It's a very hard skill, and especially to start off with. I've definitely drafted before, but this is after 1.5 miles of my swim in an Ironman swim, or on a longer open water swim for sure. Once I find that I am swimming with the same person or the same group, and I'm either 20 yards next to them or 20 yards behind them, and it stayed like that the entire way or for the last mile, then that's a different story, because then I can either work my way up to those feet and just stay there, because I know they swum a good line because they've been the same space as I have the whole time. They're swimming a good pace and speed because they've been swimming the same speed as I have the whole time. So then that last half mile, a little bit more, yes, then it's fine to pace. But that's not the strategy. The strategy is to swim your own race, to use the open spaces the way you can in big open water races where there's 2,000 people on the course with you. And then when things do present themselves, opportunities present themselves, for sure, then drafting's okay. Then it's not part of the strategy. It's an opportunity that presented itself. And that's the same thing on the bike. And I'm not talking drafting on the bike, but I'm talking, well, yes, I'm sorry, I'm talking drafting on the bike in the illegal format. Like, why even put yourself in a place for the day where your result is being dictated by somebody else? Again, you spend so much energy on paying attention to a motorcycle and getting caught, and then energy and yo-yoing back and forth or rubber banding back and forth behind these, cyclists to keep up and so on. It's just not worth it. And again, you've trained for a long time, A, to have a steady fitness for this, B, to conserve energy and ride efficiently in order to have a good run. And we don't want to take that away from us based off of what some other yo-yo rider or not that good rider or great rider or whatever is doing. And the other part of the drafting, what I was talking about just now with not the illegal type, is don't get your energy and your worries and upset by others drafting around you. That's something we don't control, and it is what it is, and things will shake themselves out. That the best athletes over 140.6 almost always have the result. And there's a lot of arguments people make for drafting and why it's so, it helps people get to a faster result. I'm not sure I believe that, and that's a different discussion, and I can talk about that on a different podcast and go into depth about it, why I feel that way. But my point here is with drafting and why I'm not a fan of it with regards to our own races, swimming, or being bothered by it on the bike is the entire concept of I'm putting my day into the hands of somebody else, whether that's on the swim or on the bike. On the run, it's a different story. So, yes, that is the answer to that question, why I'm opposed to drafting. Okay, so the final question, as this is getting quite long, is what is my background with regards to coaching? What kind of certifications, what kind of education, what kind of knowledge base do I have in order to be coaching? It's a question I received a few weeks ago, and I think answering it gives many of you, my athletes, this audience, a better insight into how I coach and why I coach. So, no, I have no certifications. I have no education in anything ultra endurance related. I don't have exercise physiology degrees. I don't have my USAT level 1. I don't have cycling, master's level coaches, anything. I have years of doing. I have years of excellent coaching across 2 sports, across many levels, from beginner, where I once was a beginner as well in triathlon, to elite Olympic level coaching, to professional coaching, to great peers and mentors, people who are willing to share a lot of knowledge. I have longevity in the sport, having been in ultra endurance sports. Let's talk mainly about that versus swimming for now. Of being in this sport now for almost 20 years. And 20 years means I met and worked and trained alongside some of the old guard when I got into the sport, whether that's the Greg Welch's, whether that's the Dave Scott's, whether that's the Wolfgang Dietrich's, whether that's the Mark Allen's. I was lucky to train with the Wendy Ingrams, with the Chris Lietos, with the a variety of athletes across all sectors, strong cyclists, strong swimmers, strong overall results, multiple Ironman winners, coaches, and so on. And then, through the years of just coaching myself, observing myself, working with a variety of different athletes and having to come to solutions or figure out solutions for them to be successful, and constantly adapting to that. So, no, I think coaching is not necessarily, especially in ultra endurance sports, not necessarily can be done, should be done out of a book. Most of the knowledge you learn in this sport comes from having done it, in my opinion. Of course, there's some physiological knowledge, some detailed knowledge when it comes to how the body is working, reacting, adapting, and so on. That comes from exercise physiology. And I would love to have a degree in exercise physiology to combine with many years of experience, but I don't. And that's how I approach my coaching, knowing that it's not about what you train, it's about how you train, it's about how your brain works with that training, it's about strategy, it's about execution, it's about the holy grail of nutrition and hydration. It's about so much more than just swim, bike, run. And a lot of that side of the sport, a lot of that side of the coaching, of what to do when, how hard to do it, and what intervals. Yes, it's fun to put together, and it's part of my job as a coach. But I also feel the bigger responsibility to truly coach is helping the athlete progress in all the other aspects other than swim, bike, run training. Whether that's getting their head and mind straight for putting together a race performance that they can be happy with, satisfied with, proud of, whether that's getting to the next level of having done plenty of Ironmans and wondering, well, how do I get to qualify for Hawaii? What's the difference? What do I need to do? Whether that's ultra runners and helping them progress from 50 to 100 mile to 100 mile faster than 24 hours to, attacking a 100-mile race course at Western States, all the way to helping guide athletes just becoming better athletes. That's not a question of being an elite athlete. That's just a question of guiding them, working together with them to make them better athletes. That's a mindset, that's an approach, that's a preparedness, that's a positive outlook, that's a willingness to work, that's a discipline, a daily discipline to do the work. All that is, in my opinion, a bigger part of coaching than just doing what is on the training plan. And I've found over the years that the athletes that work best with me, that have had the best results, the ones that have progressed the most, the ones that are most satisfied with my coaching, have consistently taken advantage of that aspect of working with me side by side, and that we come to a solution together on how to make them a better athlete. Not just do this and therefore you will be a better racer. Do this training plan, do it like this, and therefore you will become. No, that's not how coaching works. To me, coaching is about working with the athlete, about listening to what they need, about understanding who they are, what they've done, why it hasn't worked, and what could work. It's about finding their solution for progress, whether that's just daily progress, monthly progress, whether that's breaking 5 hours in this, whether that's breaking 24 hours in that, whether that's achieving a distance in this. There's so many different goals and so many different challenges out there. Coaching is about helping the athlete achieve them. I guess a better way to say that would be helping the athlete optimize their performance. That's what I would truly define coaching as. In a lot of ways also, because I don't have the academic background or the science background, it's more about taking it of what I know and what I've learned and what I've observed and making it more practical in its use, in your understanding, you the athlete, of that science that's out there, that academic component that's out there, and how it works in a practical manner, how it's applied on the road and in racing. And also, many times, many of the questions that are being asked by the athlete, or the needs that need to be fulfilled in order to become a better athlete, is a conversation, is a communication together towards figuring out how they can do it. The athlete these days is a working athlete. Very few of you are professional athletes that have all day. So figuring out with the time we have, with life stresses, with family schedules, with limited hours to achieve your goals, that is coaching, not just swim, bike, run plans. So yeah, that's sort of the background with regards to coaching and my lack of science. I mean, of course, I have 20, 30, 40 years just of science, exercise science, of having done it myself, whether it's being cut in the ear after every 100 freestyle in order to get a blood sample for lactate testing in the pool back when I was 16, to hundreds and hundreds of tests, whether in a lab or leaning out of a car or doing them at training camps or up a hill, or seeing data from all kinds of athletes, results, having taken part in what is 34, 40, 50, I have no idea, Ironmans in the meantime, and ultra races and half Ironmans and open water swims and my swimming years. So, I mean, there is so much input there that I hope to just transfer on to my athletes, whether that's the nutrition insights that I've gathered over 20, 30, 40 years of doing this, whether it's the mindset, whether it's the fueling, whether it's the race strategy and taking advantage of the day, of the course, of other competitors, whether it's breaking through and understanding what you are capable of and understanding that you are a better athlete once you get to that other side, and what you are capable of with regards to a new you, a more confident you, a stronger you. The feedback coming to me of saying, I never knew I was capable of this much and now I want more. That is athletic growth, and that is moving forward. And to me, that is coaching. So, yeah, that is the science of my coaching, the science background of mine. So that hopefully answers that. All right, that should be it for today. Plenty of time. I think we're in the mid-50s here on time on this podcast. I hope, again, that you got some value out of this. And next week, we'll dive into a single topic again, or two, or not even next week, in a couple of days. And yeah, until then, I hope you have some great training days. I hope you get to take advantage of your endurance and your fitness. We have a variety of people racing at Ironman Florida this weekend, as well as New York Marathon, as well as a 100-miler, as well as a 50K. All kinds of events happening this weekend for a variety of all of you, the AIMP athlete. So hopefully you are all able to execute your plan, to finish successfully, to feel good about your result, to feel like you're progressing and moving forward, that you're a better athlete after these races than you were before. And I will talk to you in a couple of days on the next podcast. Thank you. Seriously, thank you for listening.